Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today is part 3 of my series where I break down my top 10 players at each position. And today's video is going to be about my top 10 players at the small forward position. So without any further delay, let's get right into it. Before I get into my top 10, I have 3 honorable mentions that I would like to talk about. First up, I have OG Anunoby, the small forward for the Toronto Raptors, who averaged 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game last year. On the defensive end of the floor, OG is one of the best on-ball defenders in the league, and as well as being a very good help defender, even though he's not as good off the ball as he is on the ball, he's still, very good off the ball. And being right around 6'7", 230 pounds, he has the ability to guard one through four. And he's definitely, in my mind, an all defensive caliber player, being one of the top 15 best defenders in the entire 15 to 20 best defenders in the entire league. And then offensively, he's had issues in terms of creating his own shot this past year. But in terms of just being a floor spacer, his 3-point attempts have continued to go up, and he's maintained a very high, efficiency, shooting right around, I believe, 5 to 6 3-pointers per game last year, and he maintained right around a 39% efficiency rate, on those 3-point attempts. So despite his self-creation issues, OG Anunoby is still one of the best floor spacing forwards in this league, and is also an all defensive caliber of player. And the only reason why he's not in the top 10 is, again, due to his self-creation issues. Moving on to my second honorable mention, I have DeAndre Hunter, the small forward for the Atlanta Hawks, who averaged 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game last year. DeAndre Hunter was the anchor for Atlanta's perimeter defense. He was their best perimeter defender last year. He was very solid on the ball as well as off the ball, given that he is 6'8", 200, right around 220 pounds. He is a bit bigger than OG Anunoby, and he's able to guard, again, 1 through 4. And Atlanta did play him a lot at 4, but he mainly played at the small forward position. And then offensively, he did a very adequate job of, spacing the floor for Trae Young and Bogdanovic. And he did have, one or two, he didn't do too much, self-creation, but he did have, 1 or 2 moves that he did stick to. And I really liked his off the catch rip, one dribble pull up, which is so important, not just at the NBA level, but at all 3 levels, any level of basketball, really. And I thought DeAndre, when you watch the film, DeAndre Hunter really impressed me, in terms of that. And he did suffer a torn meniscus this year. So, the counting stats don't look as good as they did when he was fully healthy. So, I give him a pass for that. And when he was healthy, he was a 17-point per game scorer. Was able to space the floor at a very good rate, and was Atlanta's anchor for their perimeter defense. So I expect him to continue to grow, and I am expecting him to jump into the top 10 next season. And as for my final honorable mention, I have Mikal Bridges, the small forward for the Phoenix Suns, who averaged 13.5 points per game last year, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. Mikal Bridges is one of the strongest perimeter defenders in the league, given that, he is right around 6'8". With that wingspan that he does have, is not all that strong. So he's not capable of guarding, 4s like maybe OG Anunoby or DeAndre Hunter is. But he's just such a dominant perimeter defender and such a switchable and defender. And I think he is the best help defender out of these 3. Given that wingspan and given that quickness that he has, right around that 6'7", 6'8" size. And then offensively, he doesn't do too much in terms of self-creation. Very similar to DeAndre Hunter, Mikal Bridges impressed, with that rip one dribble pull-up game. But he didn't take as many threes as OG Anunoby, but he did shoot the best out of these 3. Shooting right around 4 threes per game at I believe a 42% clip, which is very good. So again, all 3 of these guys are young perimeter defenders that I'm expecting to continue to grow, and all 3 of these guys have self-creation issues. But all 3 of these guys are still young, and I'm expecting them to grow as time goes on, and maybe even catapult themselves into my top 10. Moving on to my top 10, at number 10, I have Andrew Wiggins, the small forward for the Golden State Warriors, who averaged 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game this previous season. It was his first full season in the Golden State Warriors system, and defensively, him and Draymond led this Warriors team to not only being a top 10 defensive unit, but a top 5 unit defensively in the entire NBA. He's asked to guard the opposing team's best perimeter players, And, he certainly delivered with that. And, in my opinion, Andrew Wiggins is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, especially on ball. He's one of the best on ball defenders in the entire NBA, and also had his moments as a help defender. Still had his Andrew Wiggins moments where he kind of falls asleep, kind of falls like out of focus, but was still a very solid defender off ball. And, on ball, he's one of the strongest in the entire NBA, and he was able to guard 1 through 3, being, at that 6'7", height with the length that he does have. He was a borderline actually, he wasn't just, he was an all defensive caliber of player. He's one of the 20 best defenders in the entire league, in my opinion. And he certainly deserves his praise on that side of the floor. And then offensively, he did have his struggles, in terms of, having the Andrew Wiggins, inefficient scoring nights. But, in terms of, spacing the floor for Steph Curry and the rest of the Golden State Warriors players, I think he certainly did a solid job, shooting right around 38% on 5 attempts per game. And as opposed to, the guys that I list in my honorable mentions list, most of his, a good majority of his threes, came, in terms of his own creation. And, at times he was asked to be the second option on offense, when Steph Curry was either on the bench or, just was being doubled or, just didn't have it going. He was asked to be that second option. And, he certainly still had his Andrew Wiggins moments. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still Andrew Wiggins, but, he was much better than he was in Minnesota. And, so overall, Andrew Wiggins is all NBA caliber defender. And offensively, he can still create his own shot despite the inefficiencies. I think he creates his own shot much better than, like an OG Anunoby, even though he is still, relatively inefficient. And he's gotten much better as a floor spacer. But again, I think the gap between Andrew Wiggins and, OG Anunoby or a healthy DeAndre Hunter or, and Mikal Bridges is really not that big at all. It's really splitting hairs. And if really all these guys are all in one group for me. As well as the guy that I'm about to get into at number 9. Moving on to number 9, I have DeMar DeRozan, the small forward for the San Antonio Spurs, now the Chicago Bulls, but last season the San Antonio Spurs, who averaged 21 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists per game last year. Offensively, DeMar DeRozan is certainly one of the most unique players in the NBA. He's probably, in my opinion, is the best mid-range scorer in the NBA, the way he's able to get to his spots at will. Defenders know he's going to the mid-range right around the elbow free throw line. They can't do anything to stop him. The way he's able to, he's certainly not as egregious as, a Trae Young or a James Harden with, his foul drawing, but it's in a much more smarter way. It looks much more smoother than those guys, whereas those guys, it looks just, it's infuriating to watch it. DeMar DeRozan, it's actually pretty slick. It looks like he's just schooling these guys. So, again, he's the best mid-range scorer in the NBA. And he's turned into one of the best playmakers in the NBA. Was really the de facto ball handler for that San Antonio team last year, and did a great job of running that offense in terms of finding guys in pick and roll scenarios, and as well as just finding the open men. In terms of just swinging the ball or just setting up plays, he did a great job. And in terms of that, and DeMar DeRozan has turned into one of the best playmakers in the NBA. However, DeMar DeRozan does not space the floor at all, and being only 6'6", he's not a big man, so him not shooting the ball at all from behind the arcs is a big liability. At when I'm ranking these guys, I can't rank him any higher than 9 because of how poor of a three-point shooter is. He won't even take threes anymore. And then we take a look at the defensive end of the floor, where he is a complete liability. DeMar DeRozan is not big enough where you can just throw him onto the worst player in the league, player on the court, and it'll be fine. He just doesn't have that ability given how slow he is, and he's really a tweener on defense. And whether it's just effort or whatever it is, he's not good defensively. DeMar DeRozan does not have a position he could guard defensively. He's not good in pick and roll situations as a help defender. Nothing. DeMar DeRozan is not a good defender, and he can't shoot. He doesn't shoot threes. So he's a great playmaker and the best mid-range scorer in the NBA, but does not shoot threes, does not space the floor, and is a very, very poor defender. So, even though he does have very strong positives, he has very strong negatives as well. And he's such a unique player that it is hard to rank him. But, I had to put him at 9, just given how big his weaknesses are. And if you want to tell me that Andrew Wiggins is better than DeMar DeRozan, because Andrew Wiggins, again, as I previously said, was one of the best on-ball defenders in the league and is a very good floor spacer and can create his own shot. Not as good as DeMar DeRozan, but still can create his own shot. I'll listen to that. I really think DeMar DeRozan, Andrew Wiggins, OG, Mikhail, and DeAndre Hunter, when healthy, they're all really in the same tier of player. It's just DeMar DeRozan is probably more talented than those guys. It's just that his weaknesses are just so huge that it's hard to rank him any higher than this. So I have DeMar DeRozan at 9 again, the best mid-range scorer in the NBA. One of the best playmakers in the NBA, facilitators in the NBA, but doesn't shoot threes at all, doesn't space the floor, and is one of a very, very, very poor defender. So I couldn't put DeMar DeRozan any higher than 9. Moving on to number 8, I have Michael Porter Jr., the small forward for the Denver Nuggets, who averaged 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 1 assist per game this previous season. And, offensively, Michael Porter Jr. is just a special, special talent. He couldn't have ended up in a better situation than in Denver. With that two-man game with him and Jokic, it unlocks his shooting ability, with that gravity that Jokic has and, the other scorers on that Denver team, and just his efficiency as a scorer. It's just ridiculous. He took nearly 6 threes. He took a little bit over 6 threes per game this previous season and hit them at a 44% clip. That is unprecedented. That smooth stroke that he has, at that 6'10 frame, there's no contesting or blocking his shot, and when he's hot, it's over. And, in his second year, he did a much better job at not only finishing around the basket, but just looking more comfortable on the offensive end, in terms of, knowing when to cut to the basket or when to spot up, and fighting through contact, also as the roll man in pick and roll, I thought he did much better. But, the one thing that you would like to see Michael Porter Jr. continue to develop on the offensive side of the floor is creating his own shot. He did have, one dribble step back or one dribble sidestep, one dribble pull up, which is great. Again, as I stated before, you love to see that, but, you want to see him continue to develop his offensive repertoire as, 91% of his 3-point attempts were assisted on. So, you would like to see him continue to develop an offensive bag, but this is a great starting spot for him. But defensively, he does struggle. I think he was definitely better than what he showed in his rookie year. He got better his second year, but he still isn't, a positive. And I think he was kind of exposed a little bit, in the playoffs, just because of his even though he has the height, his lack of, foot speed, being able to move around, all that great, just change directions on, at the snap of fingers. Because he's always had back injuries, going back to his days in at Missouri. So I think he's going to continue to get better at that, as his body continues to heal, and he has more off seasons, not just this off seasons, but in upcoming off seasons to work on his body and continue to build strength in his back. I think he's going to get quicker, and I think he's going to get faster. But he was a pretty, right around below average, mediocre defender, bad at times for Denver. So I think he'll continue to get better at that. But offensively, he's just a special talent. Arguably, he's, in my opinion, he's probably going to become a superstar on the offensive end. Just given his efficiency as a scorer, and I don't think he quite has the bag, to warrant him being any higher on this list, and just his defensive issues as of right now. But I expect both of those things to change, in the near future, and I expect Michael Porter Jr. to be, a perennial all-star, for years to come. Moving on to number 7, I have Brandon Ingram, the small forward for the New Orleans Pelicans, who averaged 24 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists this previous year for that ball club. And, Brandon, I'm not the biggest Brandon Ingram fan, so, the highest I could put him is, either 7 or 6. I think him and the next guy, they pretty much go hand in hand in terms of rankings. You could convince me of either one of them being ahead of the other. But, Brandon Ingram had a very solid season after, winning Most Improved Player 2 years ago now. A very, very good player, very good offensively. He's a 3-level scorer, right? He can shoot the ball, create his own shot from behind the arc. He create his own shot at the mid-range, and he can score at the rim. And even despite what the numbers might say, I don't think he's as good of a playmaker as, 5 assists at that small forward position might make you think. I think it's just mainly due to, him having the ball in his hands, and I don't think he necessarily makes his teammates better or sets anybody up. I think he's an all right playmaker. But again, I don't think Brandon Ingram necessarily makes anybody better, which limits his overall impact for me, and as well as he has major defensive issues, and which is extremely frustrating for me since I've always believed in him, as a defender. And again, everybody on that New Orleans team was poor defensively except for Lonzo Ball this previous season. So you could give him a slight pass, but still, given his height, his length, you'd expect him to be much better than he is. I think it's really just effort for him. But he is a three-way scorer. One of the most complete three-way scorers, arguably in the whole NBA. His ability to score from behind the arc, create his own shot, as well as at the mid-range area, and as well as at the rim. You can make an argument that he's not amongst the best of the best, but he's still one of the most complete scorers in the game. In terms of being able to score from all three levels, as stated. The reason why I just have him at number 7 and not number 6 is just his defensive woes, which is unforgivable for me. Given how old he is already. He's not a spring chicken in the NBA anymore, and his lack of getting his other teammates involved. And despite what the numbers might say, those 5 assists, he's not as good of a playmaker, and I don't think he really makes his teammates better. So I do think despite Brandon Ingram being a very good 3-level scorer, his lack of playmaking, again, despite those 5 assists, in terms of just when you watch the games, he just doesn't make his teammates better, and his defensive issues, really limits his Brandon Ingram's overall ceiling for me, and that really shows in New Orleans' record, despite having both him and Zion. So again, Brandon Ingram is a great 3-level scorer, but his defensive issues and his lack of making his teammates better just hinders his ceiling for me, and that's the reason why I have him at number 7. And again, he's definitely an all-star caliber player, probably a lower end all-star, but still an all-star caliber player nonetheless. But again, due to his defensive and making his teammates better issues, I can't put him any higher than number 7. Moving on to number 6, I have Gordon Hayward, the small forward for the Charlotte Hornets, who averaged 19.6 rebounds and 4 assists per game this previous season. Offensively, Gordon Hayward is one of the most complete forwards in the entire NBA, with his ability to both play on and off the ball at a high level. From behind the arc, he shot right around 5 threes per game and hit them at a 41% clip. And he shot a decent percentage both on and off the ball, which is very good. He's a very good mid-range scorer as well. It's not the best skill set in his repertoire, but he still does a very good job, scoring at that mid-range area, and is also a very good finisher. He does a solid job cutting as well, and he's one of the best playmaking forwards in the league as well. Despite what I said about Brandon Ingram, where the counting stats don't say everything, where the counting stats overrate his playmaking ability. With Gordon Hayward, the playmaking, the forces per game underrates his playmaking. He does a very good job in terms of swinging the ball, hitting cutters, hitting the open man. Doesn't run too many pick and rolls, but when he does, he always makes the right move, right read. Whether that's taking a shot, or passing it to the roll man, hitting the roll man, passing it to an open shooter. Gordon Hayward just always seems to be making the right play, and given his efficiency from behind the arc, both on and off the ball, and he does a pretty good job in terms of creating his own mid-range shot. Warrants him being this high, and he's not a great defender or anything. Despite that 6'7" frame, he's not the quickest of guys, so he is liable to get beat. And I think he's right around an average defender, right around average to slightly above average as a defender. But given all that he does on the offensive end, and again, the counting stats aren't crazy, compared to a guy like Brandon Ingram. But again, his ability to score on and off the ball, be a very strong playmaker in pretty much every situation, and is just a very strong, positive impact player, warrants Gordon Hayward being at this number 6 spot. Moving on to number 5, I have Chris Middleton, the small forward for the Milwaukee Bucks, who averaged 20.6 rebounds and 5.5 assists per game this previous season. Not much needs to be stated about Chris Middleton. We've all seen his skill set put on display during this playoff run that Milwaukee just had. Defensively, he's able to guard, guys from Kevin Durant to Devin Booker to, Bogdan Bogdanovic, at that 6'7" height. How long he is, he's able to contest a lot of guys' shots. So, despite not being an all-NBA caliber defender like some of the other guys on this list, I think he's a pretty good help defender, not the best, and I think he is liable to get beat by the better guards in the NBA. But again, he's a very good defender. Not an All NBA caliber defender like some of the other guys on this list, but still a very good defender nonetheless. And on the offensive side of the floor, he's able to not only space the floor for Giannis. As he shot nearly 5 threes per game and hit them at a 41% clip, but he is also Milwaukee's #1 perimeter option, as we all saw. He was major for Milwaukee. He was the Robin to Giannis's Batman, hitting clutch threes. He's a pretty solid mid-range scorer as well as being a good finisher around the rim. And him, Drew Holiday, and Giannis kind of take turns running Milwaukee's offense. So due to the ball pretty much always being on his hands on the perimeter, he racks up a bunch of assists, and I think he's developed as a playmaker as time has gone on. So again, not much needs to be stated about Chris Middleton. We all know how good he is. As a very strong defender, again, not an all NBA caliber defender like some of the other guys previously mentioned, but, a great defender nonetheless. And then offensively being, a great scorer on and off the ball, being able to create his own shot at such a rate that he was the Robin to Giannis's Batman, on a title team. Chris Middleton was the 2A on a title team. So, not much else needs to be stated. We've all seen Chris Middleton, and I have him at number 5. Moving on to number 4, I have Jimmy Butler, the small forward for the Miami Heat, who averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists per game this previous season. Again, another player similar to Chris Middleton, not much needs to be stated. I mean, we all know how good Jimmy Butler is on the defensive side of the floor, being one of the 15-10 best defenders in the NBA, being awesome both off the ball as well as on the ball, being able to cover multiple positions at that 6'7" height. Not much. We all know how good of a defender Jimmy Butler is. Not much needs to be stated there. And as well as offensively, his ability to create his own shot and in the mid-range, and as well as being a very strong finisher in the paint due to, again, that height, but also given how strong he is. He's only 230 pounds, but he's very, very built, a very swole player. And not much needs to be said in terms of his self-creation ability and as a playmaker, right? He's pretty much Miami's pseudo point guard, despite them having Goran Dragic last season, and with Kendrick Nunn. He was really running Miami's offense, and he did a great job finding their shooters, hitting Bam in pick and roll situations. Jimmy Butler just always seemed to be making the right decision, and his impact goes without stating, and he really is the heart and the engine of this Miami team on both sides of the floor. The only reason why I don't have him ahead of the guy that I have at 3 is just because of his lack of shooting. Jimmy Butler really doesn't take any more threes, which is kind of weird. Kind of like he's pretty much in the same tier of a shooter as DeMar DeRozan, where they only take about 1 3, if that, per game. And, they're just not good shooters. So they just elected to, remove the 3-point shot out of their arsenal. And, despite, that being, relatively smart in theory, still, not having that 3-point shot, as an ability to space the floor for his other teammates does take away value from Jimmy Butler. And, despite how good of a defender he is, again, being one of the 15 to probably not even one of the 10 best defenders in the NBA. And, given that how strong of a playmaker he is, how strong of a mid-range scorer and a finisher he is, still, his 3-point shot, does limit, him to being only at number 4 on my list, despite his impact. Moving on to number 3, I have Jayson Tatum, the small forward for the Boston Celtics, who averaged 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game this previous season. Similar to the other two guys, not much needs to be stated about Jayson Tatum. On the defensive end of the floor, he's a very strong on-ball defender, but, is one of the best help defenders in the NBA, just given, his size and length, at that 6'9", 6'10" frame. He's listed at 6'8", but he's really 6'9", 6'10". Given how quick he is and how long his arms are, he looks like he's all over the place on the court most of the time. And, he's given that, again, his height, he's able to guard 1 through 4, and he's all NBA borderline to lower end all NBA caliber player, in my opinion. And then on the offensive end of the floor, not much needs to be stated. Jayson Tatum is one of the best offensive players in this league. His ability to be a 3-level scorer is unprecedented. His ability to create for himself from behind the arc is incredible. He can score in bunches, being a pretty solid mid-range scoring as well. And he's gotten much better, in terms of finishing around the rim as well. So he's improved as a scorer, and, he's always been a solid rebounder. That those numbers have just continued to grow as his career has gone on, and he's gotten much better as a playmaker. I think he still needs to continue to take strides in terms of making, more advanced reads when teams, double team him, and he gets, and, defenses put more and more pressure on him. But again, he's grown, in terms of, his playmaking. And the only reason why I have him ahead of Jimmy Butler, even though it's very close for me, is just because of his ability to space the floor and how good of a scorer he is. So again, Jayson Tatum is a borderline to lower end all defensive caliber of player. He's one of the best help defenders in the NBA, and being a good on ball defender. He can guard 1 through 4, and then on the offensive end, he's one of the best scorers in the NBA, and he's growing every year as a playmaker. So Jayson Tatum is a superstar in this league and is only going to continue to grow up these ranks as time continues to go on. Moving on to number 2, I have Kawhi Leonard, the small forward for the Los Angeles Clippers, who averaged 25 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game this previous season. This Kawhi Leonard doesn't need much explanation as to why he's at number 2. Defensively, I do think that he's seen better days. I think he's still a good defender, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's as good of a defender as, the guy that we'll get into that I have at, number 1. But he can lock when he does lock in. He can look like the guy that he used to be with San Antonio. But still, he's not as good of a defender as he used to be. Still a very good defender. But again, not what he used to be in San Antonio as both a help defender as well as how strong he is on ball. Again, he's still a very good defender, just not what he used to be in San Antonio. Due to the injuries and him needing to be much more conservative. And then on the offensive side of the floor, it's Kawhi Leonard, right? Doesn't need much explanation. Given the difficulty of shots and the volume of shots that he's taking, both from behind the arc and and at that mid-range area and at the basket, and he's able to maintain a very, very good efficiency at all 3 levels, as he is one of the best 3-level scorers in the NBA. Not nearly as efficient as, like a Kevin Durant, but, Kevin Durant's a 101, and, Kawhi Leonard still has very good efficiency for the difficulty and volume of shots that he's taking. And, just like with Paul George, which I'll get into, in a different list, they've both stepped up their playmaking due to, the Clippers not really having like a lead playmaker. So he's gotten much better at, finding, hitting the open man, keeping the ball moving, and hitting, the rollman again. So this is Kawhi Leonard. And, I did have a debate as to whether or not him and Jayson Tatum would swap. But again, it's just Kawhi Leonard, and his overall impact is why I have to have him at number 2. But again, it's Kawhi Leonard, right? Doesn't need much explanation. And finally, at number 1, spoiler alert, I have LeBron James, right? What a shocker. The small forward for the Los Angeles Lakers, who averaged 25.7 rebounds and 8 assists per game this previous season. What is there to say about LeBron, right? On the defensive end of the floor, he's the best help defender in the league, in my opinion. He acts like a strong safety. And on ball, he's able to guard multiple positions. Isn't nearly as good as he used to be, on ball, but is still very, very good on ball. That just shows you how good of a defender LeBron was, in his prime, just because he's lost some of that foot speed to keep up with like the best of the best guards in the league. But he's the best help defender in my mind, no questions asked. The way he's able to hawk the ball, monitor situations, the way he leads guys on defense is just unprecedented. Again, he's one of the best rebounders at his position. Probably is arguably the best rebounding small forward in the league. Then on offense, LeBron is LeBron. He's one of the best slashers in the league. He's gotten better as a shooter. And not much needs to be said about LeBron's playmaking chops. He's one of the best playmakers in NBA history, one of the top 5 playmakers in NBA history. So LeBron is LeBron. Even though he was injured and he didn't look great in the playoffs, you got to keep in mind that he was hurt, and his mind probably wasn't in it 100%. And Anthony Davis his sidekick was hurt as well. So when healthy, LeBron was not only best small forward but the best player in the league, bar none, in my opinion. So LeBron's number 1. Nobody was changing that, and I don't think it's really up for debate. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments what you agree with, what you disagree with. Who would you have over who am I missing from this list? Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Let's have a discussion about it. I want to keep building the community that we have here. So please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are subscribed, please share it with a friend, so again we can continue to build the community that we have here. And my next video is going to be about my top 10 shooting guards, so stay on the lookout for that. So that's the end of the video, guys. Again, thank you so much for watching. Please take care. Have a blessed day. Peace.